Welcome in, Campo and Joe. Look, we have got a season that is lost, but we are still showing up, punching in our clock. Joe C. from XL Primetime, our head coach, Dave Campo, as we talk Jaguar football. And by the way, we had to take the Jaguar and just basically knock him over, Coach.
He's face down. That's not a good sign.
He is. Well, this is a sign of the season. So I actually think I'm going to just turn this. And this is what Jag fans are feeling like they're seeing all the time.
Yeah.
That is exactly what they're seeing all the time. It's just bad all the way around, man.
Right. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, it really took a real deep dive this past weekend. So it's a rough around here right now.
Okay, so let's just start with the actual game. Then we're going to start big picture. Everyone's waiting to see if Shad's going to fire Doug and all this kind of stuff. But just on the game itself, that was one really good football team against one really reeling bad football team. And
Absolutely.
The result showed.
Yeah. Obviously, when I watched the replay of the game and the all-22 this morning.
You put yourself through another 60 minutes?
I did, absolutely. I just can't help it.
Works.
I can't help it. But after looking at it, you could say it was a combination of a really good football team, one that's going to contend, in my opinion, in the Super Bowl, against a team that probably is not as bad as 52-6, but were that day because it's tough with all the noise and everything.
Right.
I don't know that there was a little bit of, I don't want to say quit because I don't use that word, but there was a little bit of lack of effort during the course of the ball game, plus a better team against not as good a team.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Quit is a nasty word to use, and I don't think anybody 100% quits, or it would be really obvious. Right. But they do have a little give up in them, and basically this is almost like a wrestling match. What is or a UFC fight? What's the whole idea? To get the other one to submit, right. And when you submit, you surrender, and basically that's what happened. Now, the old line, I'm sure you know this, Coach, is that the one team won 52, the other scored 6. That one's not as good as they think they are, and this one's not as bad as people think they are. So I tend to agree with that, but usually the end of that line is that it's somewhere in the middle. Jacksonville's nowhere. They're not stepping towards the middle from that 6. The Lions with 52 may come back to the pack a little bit, but this is a problem over here.
It is. And I think I heard Doug speak at a press conference and said, this is not us. Well, it was us in that game. Yeah. And, in reference to what you're talking about, the week before, Detroit struggled with Houston. Yeah. They'll come back and they'll struggle again. But the good teams find ways to win, and I think this game was a little bit of an example of they probably got a little bit of noise from their media, the way they had to finish that game against Houston, and they probably got a little earful from Campbell.
Yeah,
that if we want to be a Super Bowl contender, we can't go into a ball game and not be 100% rolling.
Yeah, isn't that a perfect example of coaching off of a win?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can coach a lot harder off of a win than you can a loss.
Right.
Because if you lose one and you really come down on them, you're in a lot of ways making it worse. Not only do we have to suffer through the loss, but we got to suffer through the week as well. So I think it's, it was a combination of those things. And right now our football team here in Jacksonville is in a bad spot.
Yeah, we knew it was going to be a lopsided affair the way they were playing versus the way this team was playing. Second straight week without Trevor Lawrence. Mac Jones is in. Look, Mac, as much as he was a great college football player, to be able to rise from the ranks, I'll just remind people, he was I'd have to go back and look, but I'm going to just suggest a 3-star recruit at the time when Alabama came and plucked him from the Bowles school. And people watched as he went to Tuscaloosa, and he really didn't do a whole heck of a lot because they had guys in front of him.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden, he just starts to emerge, and he has a great season. There's a lot of great players around him in New York, right there with the Heisman Trophy being presented, he and his teammate Devonta Smith. Bottom line is he had a great last season in Alabama. Then also found himself in a decent spot when he first came into the league. But he's not the quarterback that you're looking for going forward.
Well, I mean, the one thing that you can look at and say, we know who our starting quarterback is.
Yeah.
It's Trevor Lawrence for the future.
Yeah.
And there's no question that, you compare the two, it's not there. So one of the things they're going to have to do if they're going to right the ship here going forward is to get Trevor Lawrence back out there.
Yeah.
Whether or not they can, whether or not they will, I don't know.
Yeah, because you go into this bye week, and we're going to get to the whole essence of whether or not they're going to get rid of their coach or not, but you go into this bye week, and then you come out of that with that last little finishing stretch, and you've got games that you're trying to figure out exactly where things are. The Titans aren't very good. The Jets aren't very good. They may see a different Colts team up there at year's end. They've got to go out to Vegas. They're not very good. And so you could at least suggest there are some winnable games. And then here's the age-old question: wins versus the draft, right?
Yeah, I listen. I'm a football coach. I'm not a.
You want to win? Yeah,
I want to win games, and I would say that the majority. People talk about tanking and all that. Some guys might not give the same effort, towards the end. But the majority of professional athletes play till the end of the season. Yeah. I've heard Leon say some guys get ready for Cabo, but I wouldn't say that the majority of the guys on a team would be in that mode.
Yeah, because they know there's tape that will live.
Absolutely. And a lot of those guys are playing for their future.
Yeah.
For whether or not they're there or whether or not they're going into somewhere else at the end of the season.
Yeah, let's just use a couple of the guys as an example here. Eric Armstead's career may be over with. He got paid a lot of money to be a guy that wasn't the same guy. Let's just put it to you that way. He is instead of an ascending player, he's a descending player. Brought in to supposedly play interiorly, he never really has for any length of time. Right. You got other guys that Darby, he may be done as well career-wise. Right. Mitch Morse may be done. I don't think he's been terrible inside at all, but he hasn't been great either. Right. Darnell Savage. You got a lot of guys that people are going to be poking in tape going, do we want to be the next team to give them a contract?
Right.
And that's where you're at.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we're at. And if you look at, the guys that we brought in this year in the free agency market, were brought in because of being around winning teams and everything, but they're not the same players. Yeah. And, I don't, you add the Gabe Davis to that, and you're talking about guys that are just guys and can't upgrade the football team. So, it's a little bit of an indictment on the decision making.
Oh my gosh, which takes us to the conversation of the week. When are you going to get rid of certain guys? Gabe Davis, by the way, out for the season with a meniscus tear, and he never really established himself at all. One game with a couple touchdowns, but then also some serious drops early in the season. A little dust up on the sideline with Trevor. It's been an enigmatic season for him. You really can't quite describe it. But let's get to the bulky part of this. And I guess what I wrestle with, Coach, is Shad Khan is one of those guys that has a lot of money, really wants to put a winner out on the field, has blind faith and trust, and empowers people that do not look like they're nearly qualified enough to hold the job as long as they do. And it's very frustrating for fans.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And there's a lot of talk about Shad being loyal to a fault, and, obviously the fans, they've suffered here in Jacksonville for a long time, and they finally had some hope, and it's kind of been dashed in the last 17 games or whatever, 3 and whatever they are, the 3 and 14, whatever it is. They're looking for something that's going to happen right now. Right. Well, even if they do make changes, it's not going to happen right now. It's down the road that you're going to see the results. And Shad, for whatever, you can't fault him for what he's tried to do for the city and for this football team. Very true. He's put his money out there. He's done an awful lot. Decision-making wise, you have to question it after you go from one general manager to another general manager to another general manager to another coach to another coach. Right. That's the concern. And I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I guess I want to see an angry Shad Khan. I think most people do. Whether that's right or wrong really don't know that it would necessarily change anything, but he needs to be hot under the collar about the performance level of this football team as a whole. It has crossed general managers and coaches. And I threw the number out, and many people have on social, and I just did the math. All it was he was the fastest to 100 losses as an owner in the modern Super Bowl era. He bought this team in 2012. Everything was approved early 2012. His team has averaged over 11 losses a season.
Right.
Okay? That was primarily through 16-game schedules, and then the last 3 years have been 17-game schedules, including this year. Anyway, he's 62 and 144, and he hasn't even played a full season yet, and they've already gotten to 9 this year, and the average, like we said, is over 11. And I'll just point out one piece on Big Cat Country, which I'm sure all of Duval that's watching us probably saw this. E. Dilla, one of our dudes that we mention quite frequently on XL Primetime, he wrote, Shad Khan, spelled C-O-N, the NFL's worst owner, is destroying the Jags. That's a pretty big headline. And you have to wrestle with the idea, is he destroying the Jags because he's willing to write every check that they need? Because that couldn't possibly be true.
Correct.
Or is it leaving the people in power that drag this franchise down?
Yeah, and I think that that's a legitimate concern, question, or whatever. I know this, though, Joe. Owners don't like to fire people in the middle of a season. Mm-hmm. And the reason for it, and it's been done. It's been done this year.
Sure.
New Orleans. It's been done with the general manager of the Jets.
And New York fired both the general manager and the head coach.
Yeah, exactly. So, to me, this team, it's not Black Monday yesterday. Mm-hmm. Black Monday comes at the end of the season. You've looked at the entire season.
Right.
Here's what you think of it. We either keep the guys or we make the changes. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that says, and believe me, guys, I'm not really being overly optimistic here by any stretch of the imagination because it's a tough to win in this league. But it's also a parity league. There's no guarantee that this team won't win the next 6 games in a row. Yeah. Nothing. I'm telling you, chances, very slim. But at the same time, to make total changes where you're telling your football team, this coaching staff is bad, I'm getting rid of them at this particular time is really kind of doing a disservice to all the time put in with that coaching staff and the players. Yeah. And so do I think that's right or wrong? I don't have, I don't have an answer.
Right.
I just know that they don't like to do that because you're telling the fans and everybody else the rest of this season is a wash. And we're not at that point yet because they literally are not out of the playoffs as of today.
Yeah, which drives you crazy. When we were doing our podcast last week, the Indianapolis Colts, who had benched Anthony Richardson, started Joe Flacco, went back to Anthony Richardson probably about the time that we got done doing the Campo and Joe podcast, and they went out and won a football game over New York, and they're right there. I call them the Olies on the outside looking in, and a chance to maybe make the postseason. That's the team Jacksonville beat. Take a look at what the Denver Broncos have done. Bo Nix is playing pretty dang good as a rookie.
Absolutely.
And they're right now in the playoff, not in the hunt, in the playoff picture. And this team, had they been able to scratch out 1 or 2 wins, would have stayed right there with the Colts and the Broncos of the world. It drives you crazy. And you're right, they're not mathematically eliminated, but you know as well as I do.
Well, and I'm saying that. Yeah. I'm not trying to paint a pretty picture.
Sure.
I'm just explaining what I think the owner has to go through in his mind.
Yeah.
Listen, when you look at this football team, what's the difference between this year and last year?
Yeah.
The difference is that they went 2 years in a row at 9-8. Mm-hmm. They haven't done that in 17 years, 20 years, whatever, 30 years, and whatever it is.
He knows because he was in the building.
Yeah, and so, do you give him another year to try to rectify things? That's what's going through Shad's mind. Okay. I guarantee it. This guy brought us, even though we've struggled at the end, he brought us 2 winning seasons when we haven't had 2 winning seasons in a row.
Right.
In a long, since the beginning, not since he's been here.
Yeah, they were trying to get to back-to-back playoffs, which also had not been done since the 90s.
Right.
And you know that because you were part of winning playoff teams in the mid-2000s, but it was 5 and 7. 06, it did not happen.
Right.
And so, all right, so you got me going on two things. And one, I know fans want to see everything like this, okay? They don't have to write the checks.
Right.
They're writing checks to buy tickets, and I 100% appreciate everybody that does that and shows their fan passion. But they also are not writing the big checks. If you tell someone, hey, hit the road, and by the way, I owe you X number of millions of dollars. So every fan out there basically wants to see something happen right now.
Yes.
Emotion gets involved.
Right.
But then the other half of what you just said is kind of important. Maybe he's not going to fire him until they're 100% eliminated from playoff competition.
And we don't know that.
Right.
You know who got everybody going is Schefter.
Mm-hmm.
Schefter comes out and says, well, they could make a move here. It's a bye week. They might do this. They might get rid of this guy. They could do this. Not once did he say, and everybody thinks, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Schefter knows something.
Right. Him and Rapp.
Let me tell you, Rappaport and shit, whatever his name is, and Schefter don't know anything. Everything is speculation.
It is.
Period.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously, what you just said, we all want something to happen right now, and it just isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, could I see you make a move with the administration?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can say, look, we finally gotten to the point where our philosophy and the way we're doing things is not where we need to be, and we need to go a little bit of different direction here without removing the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't do something, and that's why I think, you know, during this bye week, they may make a change. They may say somebody else is calling the defenses. I don't know.
Right.
But I think you have to show something. And it probably is within the makeup of the staff. But I could see letting the GM go and keep the coach until the end of the season and then make a decision from there.
It's funny because I think what most people, if they're handicapping this race at all, they're like, like Doug Peterson, for most people's money, Doug Peterson's gone. Whatever the day comes, Black Monday, whenever, he's gone. Fair or unfair, he had two winning seasons. One included a playoff and a playoff win, and yet he's going to be bounced. The other guy is Trent Baalke with the great unknown that he may have, and this is how I describe it. He's got Shad's ear.
Yep.
He's got Shad's trust. He's the man in the building that's monitoring everything and can report back to Shad. So as much as I hate to say this, at least the word I've been given is that Shad trusts him implicitly.
Yeah.
And so if Shad is going to be a better owner, just meaning results-wise, a better owner, he needs to read the tea leaves properly.
Correct.
And say, I don't care what this guy is telling me. The product sucks.
Yep. And I think that if this weekend was any indication, that's the case.
Yeah.
And I think, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Again, you don't know what it is, but I really believe the best way to get the organization turned around is it's a complete wash. It's not keep one guy and not the other.
Oh, yeah.
To me, you make a wash and then you start over again.
Yeah.
And, here we go again. All you guys out there that want something to happen, it's starting all over again when that happens.
And it's funny because I was looking to see just a couple of things. And as we're doing our podcast, and anytime you guys check it out, be it listening or watching, any way you do it, we really appreciate it. But the New York Jets are the first ones this year to fire a head coach and a GM.
Right.
And so they let go of Joe Douglas. And it's funny because as soon as I hear the news come out, I joked on our XL Primetime thread, Matt Hayes texts us and says, the Jets have fired their HC and now their GM. I'm like, wait a minute. Did they just fire Aaron Rodgers? I'm boom, 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 because he's the guy running the show. He's pulling the puppet strings. And I would consider him the GM of the Jets.
Do you remember what I said last week when I said we're at the point, this is before the Detroit game.
Yeah.
we're at the point now where you have to start questioning the GM, the coach, and who else?
The
quarterback.
Yeah, it's fair.
You question it. That doesn't mean that that's not the right guy.
Right.
But you have to look at this league is based on parity. Okay, it's based on that.
Yeah.
Well, this just points out you got to question the GM, the coach, and now you got to say, hey, maybe we have the right guy at quarterback.
Well, it's funny because as many questions that surrounded Trevor, now maybe he's the least questionable guy.
Correct.
Okay, because every other spot on this football team, you could debate, is it good enough?
Correct.
Are they making enough plays? Whatever it is. And sure, he's made his share of mistakes, but my gosh, there's a lot of other things that need fixing.
Absolutely. Let me tell you something. Trevor is not the reason they're 2-9. If you look at this football team, the major reason to me is this year's defense is not even close to what the defense was a year ago and the year before that. And we got rid of that guy.
Yeah, and look, there are guys that are pointing out, primarily Mike Caldwell's probably sitting back somewhere with an umbrella drink and toes pointing to the sun saying, how do you like me now? You know, that type of deal. And his defense caved at the end of last year. So just because one guy, the next guy sucks, doesn't mean the other guy didn't need to be relieved of his job. Right. Now, I want to go one further with you because the presser, which I know you were either at, listened to, watch, whatever, Doug Peterson was asked the question from Mark Long in the Monday presser, were you the one who told Shad this was the best roster this franchise has ever had?
Yeah, he said no.
And Doug went big-eyed and went, no.
I never said that.
And so I want to add one layer to that. And I added this on XL Primetime that Trent Baalke, I believe, convinced Shad this was the best roster. He's the only other person that could have done this. Tony Khan could not have done this. This would have been
correct.
Baalke. And he did that because he's the whistle around the neck wannabe guy undermining the head coach. If this team doesn't win, it's the head coach's fault. Now he's undermining himself because this roster sucks or is not as good as it should be. Let me ask one more, because we don't 100% know that that's Baalke, but we're all believers that that was Baalke. You start to think about when you put this whole thing together, and if Trent Baalke is going to be let go of his job, did he just sell himself short to the owner? That's really what you have to ask, right?
Yeah.
And then is Shad going to take all that and say, you know what? The guy that I trusted the most is the guy I need to get rid of.
Yeah. You could look at it that way, or you could flip it.
Okay.
And you could say, hey, I gave him the players. It's the coaches.
Which was the original idea. Yeah.
Either way, you don't know. I like to think that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
And, I'm hesitant at saying, conspiracy theorists.
Well, I just want, and Sean's got to make a decision. Every single time he's got to make one, we can call it the biggest decision of his ownership. But this one does feel like it's the biggest of his ownership. And it's because of the fails that he's had before. Letting go of Mike Mularkey after a 2-14 campaign, you don't have to defend that. But he hires Dave Caldwell and lets Dave Caldwell hire Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley didn't have any experience, and then he went to become the second losingest coach in the Super Bowl era. Then he lets go of Gus Bradley and keeps Dave Caldwell and lets him make the decision to promote Doug Marrone from within. Well, then they hire Tom Coughlin. You're like, okay, this is all going to get back to where it's supposed to be. Well, then Tom becomes a little maniacal, and then you got these players thinking they're running the show, and they're complaining to the PA, and it all goes, we all know what happened. And Shad, maybe in some respects, was bold in firing Tom Coughlin.
Right.
Then, after that, you still give Marrone and Caldwell more time after making it to the playoffs, and then they finally blow up the coach and let the GM stay for one more year. It's just unbelievable how it's gone. It really is.
Yeah. Obviously, Shad has made some mistakes in his decision making. But again, that to me, it's a lot bigger than that. I think it's, decisions made on players.
Mm-hmm.
You don't help your offensive line in the offseason. You bring in a guy that, let me tell you something. The reason Detroit kicked our tail was they ran the football and ran play action and killed us.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the way you should do it in the NFL, because they're more physical than we are. They run a running play, and it goes 5 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of 5-yard runs end up 7 or 8 yard runs because a running back runs over somebody.
Right.
But I haven't seen very many where when you get to the 5-yard mark, the offensive line is still there with the running back
running with him.
Yeah. So the physicalness of this football team on both sides of the ball is ridiculous.
Yeah. And so we got to wrap this up. But how do you fix it, and where does it fall? At what person's feet does the blame fall the most? Because I think if you're the general manager, you're making sure you hire the right guy, you're drafting the right players, you're signing the right free agents, and you're also getting the best strength and conditioning guy. So it would make sense that he's the most responsible. But take a look at what the successful head coaches are doing out there. Look at what Mike Tomlin's doing right now.
Yep.
He just embarrassed Lamar Jackson and one of the better offensive football teams out there.
I think a perfect comparison. And again, this is, we're all speculators.
Sure.
We're not in the locker room. We don't know what Shad Khan's thinking. We don't know what Doug Peterson or Trent Baalke are thinking. But the comparison is between Detroit and Jacksonville. I've heard this 100 times now. They were both the same.
Yeah.
Lousy franchises that got there, and in the same season, both went 9-8. One of them made the playoffs in the AFC, us. The other one didn't make the playoffs. But everybody said, this is the direction. Both of these teams are on the up, and here we go. To me, the difference between that franchise and this franchise comes down to the Detroit Lions pick guys that are guaranteed football players. I've said it before. They're guys that Branch, the safety. He slipped in the draft because he didn't have this or that or this. But the one thing he did have was he was a heck of a college player and a tough football player, physical and everything, and he's turned out that way. The Detroit Lions knew exactly what they wanted their football team to look like. And that's, here we're going to be physical. We're going to be like our coach. We got the right coach. We got this, and this. In my mind, you look at who we've drafted. We've drafted guys that took them 2 years to get going. Bigsby and I can name a couple. The tight end, Strange.
Even Trayvon Walker, too.
Yeah, Trayvon Walker. They took Hutchison, who you knew was there, but you took a guy on the come with Walker. And not that he's not a good football player. And then you look at, we take Mason Smith, who everybody said, including me, this guy's could be the greatest thing since sliced bread before the injury. He can't get on the field. No. So to me, the difference is I'm not sure we have an identity here. We didn't know exactly what this football team needed to look like. And I thought what Doug said at the end of last season, I know what I have to fix, and I'm going to get it fixed. I thought, here we go.
Yeah, you and I were both.
Happen. It did not happen.
And so this is the last one on that part of it that I'm going to try and drill down on, is that if Trent Baalke convinced Shad this was the best roster ever, when you take a look at, I want to know who hired Ryan Nielsen.
Yeah.
Because if Ryan Nielsen is an absolute fail, did Doug hire him or did Trent Baalke hire him?
Don't know.
And that's what I want to know. All right, real quick, because you mentioned it, and I tweeted this out just as far as the Detroit Lions. You go back in time, and the Lions basically changed the entire makeup of their organization. And they had bad on top of bad when it came to either Matt Millen running the front office, which he was a disaster, or Matt Patricia coaching the team, which he was a disaster. And then they pair up Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. And I just went through it and I said, what have they done since they were a losing franchise for so long? They cleaned house. They hired the right GM, ditto on the head coach, drafted like mothers, and now they're kicking ass. That's basically how I put it on
and
social.
two coordinators that are pretty darn good.
Oh my gosh, yes, because if you go with Aaron Glenn, who you know,
Yep.
and then Ben Johnson on the other side, they're very good. So, Coach, they were 6-10, 3-12, 5-11, 3-13, and then 9-8, like you mentioned, and they won that last game against Green Bay that year, and they look like, hey, we didn't make the playoffs, like you said, but they were doing that.
Yep.
It's unreal. It just drives you crazy.
Yep. Yeah, we were in a little trouble around here.
Yeah,
so, but let me tell you something. It wouldn't surprise me if they beat Houston.
Yeah.
I've been in the league for a long time.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen over and over and over again.
All right, Houston is still, they still have their share of problems. All right, so before we say goodbye, real quick, is anyone relieved of their duty by the time you and I are talking next Tuesday? Because I think they could go into the end of the week and Shad could make a decision on something. But I don't know exactly what it will be.
I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah.
I think if he's going to do something, he should do it now so that they can prepare themselves for
I agree.
Going forward, so that the players don't come back
not knowing
all
what's
of a
going to
sudden
happen.
they're blindsided basically on Friday, or and they're coming back on Monday.
And I think the owner's going to have the GM and head coach eat those L's.
Yeah.
Is how I'm saying it.
Yep.
And then Doug still believes he can turn this thing around.
Right.
We'll find out
Right.
whether that's a job saver or not. Coach, as always, we appreciate it.
Yeah. I wish it was under better terms.
We apologize for this, but hopefully they will not show their rear end the next time we are doing our show. Campo and Joe, have a good one.